Today on the show, we've got Sharon Kirstin. Welcome, Sharon. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited too.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're going to get into it, but let me introduce you first. So Sharon Kirstin is a clinical trauma-informed hypnotherapist and master mindset coach. She works with the subconscious and shadow self, which we're going to dive into, to help her clients heal their inner child and reprogram limiting beliefs and behaviors so that they can access new inner resources to help manifest their goals faster. I don't know about everyone else, but this is probably the most exciting chat I've had because this is underneath everything. So I encourage everyone to listen to all of this. And even if you get triggered or even if it's too much, it's such important work because it's the stuff that's hidden that needs to be brought to the surface for us to work on, right? Yeah.
Exactly. When it hurts, we got to run towards it. That's where the breakthrough happens.
Yeah, it's so true. I said, I had a podcast interview yesterday and I said the same thing. It was like, I used to, when I get triggered, I used to be like, oh, I've got triggered. Now I'm like, triggered, yeah. And there's the work. Let's go there.
It's a good reframe.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same. I always get excited when my clients feel really like they're going through a hard time and they're already telling me, you're going to love this because I don't feel good.
That's what mine said to me. That's so funny. I must think we're sadistic or something.
Yeah, it does sound like that. But I'm like, no. This is good. You got to move through this because beyond this point, it's going to get so good. And I'm excited for you because you're almost there. Don't give up now.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So let's start super basic because not everyone understands what shadow means. So I would love to just start there. Like, what is a shadow?
Yeah, shadow work, the term itself was coined by Carl Jung. And in my own words, it basically means that you're making the unconscious conscious. It's all about becoming self-aware of these parts of ourselves that we usually hide from others. Because we have a persona that we show to the public that is socially acceptable, that gets us love, recognition, whatever we look for. And then there is this other part of us that we've deemed unworthy, unlovable, and we're hiding that part or these parts of us. These are usually child parts that have gotten stuck in time because there was trauma or pain or just a significant event that imprinted itself. And so these parts, the way I see it, is they are still looking for completion. They still want to heal. And so they're going to show up again and again and again and trigger us, like you said before, so that we can see them. So for me, the shadow, darkness and dark things are so difficult for spiritual people or people on a growth path, usually because they don't want to go there. We've been marinated with this idea in the spiritual community that it only needs to be love and light, only positivity, which is so toxic because if you're only staying in your positivity, you never actually get the deep healing that liberates you because you're, it's that toxic positivity where it's never possible for you to actually get the breakthrough. And so the shadow basically is just an unloved part of ourselves that we're trying to hide from the world because we deem it unworthy, but actually it's just a part that needs healing, compassion, acceptance. So through accepting ourselves as we are, we can actually change. And if we try to stay upbeat all the time and we try to ignore these parts, we can never actually find full self-acceptance and we can never get the real change we're looking for. Because there is this curious paradoxon in psychology that says, only when I fully accept myself as I am, I can change.
Wow, that's really powerful. So, yeah, I actually love how you framed that because like when you can say that that part just wants love, like that's part of you, how can you not give that part love? How can you not want to support that part as opposed to shaming it away and pretending it doesn't exist? Like it feels like, you've got rid of the naughty child in the corner where it's, you're not looking after it, but all that needs is love there.
Yeah. And this part was created because a need went unmet. You as a child, it's kind of like you're shaming your own inner child, like you're embarrassed by your own inner child. And it's so mean. We would never do this to a child in the real world.
Yes.
But internally, we keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally just that child part of us that got stuck and that feels abandoned, unloved, shameful. It has big emotions, and it's created a strategy that worked in the moment. But now that we're older, the strategy, it's maladaptive. It doesn't really get us the thing that we want. And we can really see this in relationships where there is maybe a part of us that feels so unlovable. But what we actually want is love. We want a beautiful relationship. But this part in us, it's like, oh no, you can never show yourself to someone. They're going to reject you. They are not going to love you. They're going to think you're unlovable. And then we create this whole persona of someone that we think that other person will love, but we're never really authentic. We're never really ourselves. And at some point over time, we realize, oh my God, like once this person finds out who I really am, they're not going to love me. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy that starts happening. Yeah. And just because that part just needs the healing and the acceptance, because we are lovable. And, sometimes that actually then allows us to attract the right people who will actually love us. Like, how could someone love us for who we are if we never show who we are?
Yeah. Don't show all of us, right? It's so true. It's, I spoke to a client about this the other day because it was like, here's the half of me that I want to show you, but not the whole me. And at some point, inevitably, when you're going to be with someone intimately, they're going to see those parts, whether you want them to see them or not. So I'd rather you show them off early so that, they can either love that or not love that, and then they're out of there. Otherwise, you're wasting everybody's time by putting on this mask around the half of you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this requires self-awareness.
Yeah, good point.
Which many people try to avoid. And it's a big journey to actually do the self-awareness work. And that's what shadow work is about. It's about becoming aware of these triggers, of these parts of you, instead of just living them out and living out the coping strategies, living out all these maladaptive strategies that we've created, actually questioning ourselves. Like, why do I feel like I want to run away? Why do I feel critical of this person? Why do I feel whatever emotion it is that's coming up right now? Because whenever the emotion comes up now, when there's a trigger that is really not, too big for the situation. And that's usually what it is in relationships, right? We have an argument and suddenly there's this outburst of emotion and it doesn't really seem related to the situation right now, or the emotion is just too big for how big the situation is. That's because the inner child got triggered. That's because the inner child is feeling unsafe. It's like, whoa, 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 this is not happening, and lashes out or tries to protect or shuts down and goes into this trauma response. So that's where I feel we can get really, really curious. And I think curiosity is such a more beautiful energy than, judging ourselves or whatever it may be, because we're just curious. Why am I feeling this way? When was the first time I felt this way? What number pops in my mind? Because the unconscious mind has all the answers. Our conscious mind usually doesn't. So just getting curious about what's really going on with ourselves and the situation can help so much in terms of self-awareness.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I've done this meditation before where it asked you to come up with a number for something. Can't remember what it was. And I was like, whoa, that was so clear. Wow. How did you know that? Like, it's amazing that knowledge is in there and we can access it if we want to. Yeah. How do people...
It's very powerful.
Often when you get triggered and this inner child comes out and, emotions are heightened, and I completely understand what you're saying about the curiosity, but how will people be able to cultivate that whilst being in that state? Like, how do they, when they're heightened and feeling all the emotions, and how do they separate that and become self-aware rather than being in the trigger? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. I think that's when we get into a differentiation between conversation strategies with our partner or with anybody really, and our own inner work. Because when we're relating to someone, they're always a mirror. it's a gift when we get triggered, because we can start to see something about ourselves that we would not have seen just sitting alone in a room. So probably in that moment, oftentimes it makes sense to just bring it back to ourselves and look at, okay, what's really going on here? Because in that moment when you're triggered, I don't know about you, but usually the conversations don't really get better after that point.
No.
They're not really solution oriented anymore, because that's when the inner child comes out. And then when your inner child pops out and starts accusing or defending or whatever comes up, then the other person's inner child comes out. And usually we pick partners that are such a perfect match with our inner child wounds that we trigger each other so beautifully. And then in those moments, I feel when we're wanting to have productive and healing conversations and interactions, it's probably good to just go within and do our own inner work and start questioning what's really going on. What do we want? What do we feel? What's the trigger? You know, we really need to, I feel, make a whole assessment of what's going on and do our own inner healing, plus the way we communicate with each other in a relationship, so that it can be a healing space, a space for love and acceptance and support. Because it's normal that we all get triggered. We all get triggered sometimes. It's about how we deal with it.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect, I think, is also because sometimes people go to couples therapy, right? Like, oh, we can't talk. And then they go to couples therapy. But then usually the couples therapy, or it can be, I don't want to say usually, but sometimes it's about how the communication goes. Okay, what's my trigger? What's underneath? What's the emotion? Which is all super helpful to actually understand, okay, why do you feel abandoned? Oh, that was not my intention at all. Now I understand you feel abandoned in those moments, and we can navigate the triggers. But I feel the really beautiful breakthrough comes when each person goes away, does their own inner child healing, and actually takes care of these triggers, so the triggers go away, and then you can meet each other in a space where you don't constantly have to navigate, oh, there's a trigger, oh, and you need this and you need that. So we can actually drop all of that and we can just be more present.
Yeah.
Because I feel presence with someone without all the other stuff, you know, these woundings and things that are going on. That's the truly healing energy, when you can feel just safe and present with someone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important. And that's why, like, when I do couples work, I often say, like I did it this week with a couple, like, let's have individual sessions, because sometimes it gets off track and they're blaming each other consistently and there's no accountability there individually. And that's what I need you to do. Like, couples therapy is like, or coaching for me is about just like, how do we get these two individuals to do their own work? Like, not about, yes, how you can support the other person, but what do you need to change about you? Like, not what does the other person need to change? Because if we're constantly focusing on what the other person needs to do differently, you're never going to get anywhere. It's just this like you go around in circles, and I can see how frustrating that must be for people, but yet they're not doing anything different. Yeah.
And see, that's when we look at shadow work, that's the projection. Because it's so easy to project onto the other person. You need to change that. You need to do that. It's so comfortable.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The other person is the problem. I'm not the problem.
Yeah.
I don't have any problems. If the other person changed, I'd not have any problems. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
Because the other person is a reflection and it is a mirror.
Yeah.
And so whatever we get triggered by, it's a healing opportunity. So I love that you say this as well. You're like, well, let's look at why this comes up for you specifically, because if he or she was with another person, maybe this would not come up at all. Maybe another person wouldn't be triggered by this. Maybe another person wouldn't have this expectation. So what's really going on?
Yes, totally true. Let's talk about projection, because I think that's really interesting and something I don't think a lot of people are aware of, because that often lives in, I suppose, the unconscious with the stuff that we're projecting out. So how would you simply describe what projection is, like, for someone who doesn't understand what this means?
It's basically, I feel a projection, like we're constantly projecting anyway, like the whole world is a projection. If we look at, you know, there are so many spiritual theories, I don't know what I want to call it, but like a spiritual knowledge or spiritual path that says, we're hallucinating this whole reality anyway, and everything is only an aspect of ourselves. So I feel whatever we see outside of ourselves is always something that lives within us, because we cannot see and perceive something in another that's not also present within ourselves. And so if I perceive the other person to be annoying, probably there is something in me that, that resonates with annoyance, and whatever it may be, then it's about, really being curious about, okay, what's going on here? And I feel the healing journey itself, for me, the projection is what we need, because the projection is where the healing happens. So the way I personally see it is there is a higher self, whatever we want to call it. There is a part of our soul, our self, that wants to come back to wholeness, because we came in whole. Our soul is always whole, and we come into this experience, and as children, we get conditioned. There is so much conditioning and wounding and imprinting going on, because until the age of 7, we're completely in theta brainwaves. We're open, we're sponges. We can't even reject anything that someone says to us. It just drops straight into our unconscious mind. And so once we're adults, we've taken on so much programming. It's like an operating system on a computer that we're running now. But many of these are maladaptive strategies and programs that don't really serve us and that cause us emotional pain. And I think that's why most people start healing, because they feel emotional pain and they don't want to feel this pain anymore. And so I feel the projection is these parts within us that are hurting, that are where we've separated from our true selves. They're trying to be seen by us from the outside, because we can't see them. The shadow it's a shadow. It's behind me. It's like I can't become aware of my own shadow by myself. In and of itself, it's just impossible. I always need the reflection, to actually see it and to experience it. And so the projection for me is kind of like the shadow is taken and put right in front of me as a partner, as a child, as a mother, as a business partner, as a boss. So it's this, whoa, okay, this is an aspect of myself that needs healing. And once I heal this, I'll feel more complete. I'll feel more whole. I'll feel like I have more access to my inner resources that allow me to create the things that I want to create. Does that make sense, or was that just too complex?
I don't know. It was beautiful for me to listen to.
Okay. No, sometimes I feel like I start talking and then I'm like, okay, did this make sense?
No, I think like in the most simplest terms, you're saying that it's impossible to see that by yourself. So it has to be like reflected, projected out there so that you can see it back to you. So I think that you said it beautifully.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Okay, good. I got it, guys. That was good. And the other thing I wanted to chat to you about is this term attachment wounds and what that means to people, because a lot of people are talking now. It's probably become a common term now, attachment styles. Like I see it everywhere. Everyone feels like they know their attachment and how that impacts them. And I feel like everyone's walking around going, I'm anxious, I'm avoidant. So like, what is it?
Their identity.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. It's like when mindfulness became really cool years ago. Like it's funny. These, psychological stuff comes out every now and again to be this cool thing that everyone wants to know about and know if their partner's that. And yeah, it's interesting. But like I saw that on your page that you'd written about attachment wounding, and I'd love to delve into that and how that impacts people and what that is and how people can understand that a bit better.
Yeah. There are 4 attachment styles. Maybe let's start with that.
Yeah.
For someone who has not done their own deep dive into it. There's secure attachment. There's anxious attachment, avoidant, and disorganized attachment. Sometimes the words are used a little bit differently. I think that gets super confusing. But I think these are the most common terms.
Yeah.
And so our attachment style is created in childhood with our primary caregiver. Usually already by the age of 2, because that's when we really need that support. We need the caregiver to feel safe. And when we do not feel safe, that's when a maladaptive attachment style happens. So the secure one is the one that we want, right? Like we're so zen, we're so peaceful with ourselves, we're so securely attached, and we have beautiful relationships, beautiful conversations, but probably I haven't looked up the percentages, but
I think it's high.
That's probably
I think it's around 70 or 80% securely attached.
Or securely.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's higher than we think.
To me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how they get that number, to be fair. It's not like they've interviewed everyone.
How do they get
I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is that
probably
so many of my clients are like, I am anxious avoidant. That's what I am. I'm like, that is such a small number, and that's caused from complex trauma generally. So you're probably not that. But yeah. Yeah, from my reading, it's quite a high
that's
number.
How they got the number?
Yeah, yeah, true.
They just walk around. Are you securely attached? Yes, I am.
No one has any awareness of themselves.
Exactly. Maybe we just see a certain type of people.
True.
You know, like we see the people with trauma, with pain, and so I think it just kind of seems then that more people, are struggling. But even looking around, like even not looking at my clients, when I look around, I feel like I see a lot of maladaptive strategies. And I feel like everybody's got something because nobody's had like a perfect childhood.
Totally.
And sometimes we're not even aware of our trauma. Like with some things, it took me a long time, like decades, to actually understand what happened in childhood that caused me to be the way I was. So sometimes we're not even aware of it because we're kids and we don't really question things. And then we get older, we're like, wait a minute, that was really, I don't know, bad of my parent, or that didn't feel good. And
totally. And what was okay then is not okay societally now, you know? So like there's very different. And I'm sure that when, you know, I've got a 4-year-old, I'm sure when he's having kids, how I parented him might not be okay. You know, like when I was a kid, it was like controlled crying. That was okay. You were supposed to leave your kid to cry themselves to sleep, you know, and now we know that's not okay. So yeah, it's interesting. And I also want to say that this is on a spectrum, you know, it's not like, you know, like you can have anxious tendencies and be securely attached, or, you know, avoidant, or like it's not like you are wholly one either. So, and it can change.
Yeah. Like you said before, it seems like people make it their identity. And when you make it your identity, it becomes really hard to change out of it. Because I think most people would then start to say, oh, I'm anxious, I'm avoidant. It's like, okay, now you have an explanation for why you are the way you are, but it doesn't really sound like you want to change that. So now it's more, okay, now I have permission to be this way. But if we use it, if we understand our attachment style, and we actually use it to create better relationships, that's when the beauty comes in. Because like you say, when I realize I have anxious tendencies, I can actually start thinking about, where does this come from? Why do I feel unsafe when someone's not giving me constant reassurance? Why do I feel like that person might leave me? Why do I feel like I constantly need to prove my worth in order for that person to stay? So there are all these kinds of strategies that are underlying these different attachment styles that are actually really helpful to discover and to question, so that we can then shift them. We can accept ourselves as we are and understand, okay, this is something that I've adapted in childhood. This worked for me for a certain period of time. Usually these strategies don't work anymore in adult life, because I think once we get into our 30s, we start, I'm actually curious about your experiences with that, with your clients, because we start seeing a pattern of the kind of relationship that we've had. And it's almost like the same relationship, just with different people.
Absolutely.
It's a different face.
That's all the work I do. Exactly. Right? And it might look a little bit different for like the first couple of months, and then the mask comes off and he's the same human underneath. Yeah. A lot of my clients, it's so interesting, because this is my first call with everyone, is like, tell me about these past relationships. And my brain works very well in terms of recognizing patterns. So I can often see that pattern, and then they're like, whoa, I didn't even know that was happening. That was the same thing happening with the same, you know, a different person, but in, you know, the same things are happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always that projection. It's right in front of us. But sometimes it takes us a really long time to see it. And sometimes it needs to get really, really bad until we finally learn the lesson. That's what I feel happened for me. Because looking back, until just recently, I could see, actually, when I looked at my relationship, I'm like, wow, that's seriously the same relationship over and over again. And like you said, looks a little bit different in the beginning, but then ends up being the same thing. And until it got so bad with narcissistic abuse that I had to freaking learn the lesson. There was just no more time or space to do another round, because that's usually the offering, right? Hey, here's something that looks different and that looks similar. Do you want to give it another go, or are we going to change the pattern? That's literally how it felt to me after the narcissistic abuse. I felt like I was presented all of these possible relationships, and I could see the patterns and project into the future. Whoa, this is going to be very similar. But it's almost like the universe says, hey, here it is. Do you want to do it one more time? And do you want to do it? It really felt like that. And it's sometimes hard to say no. I've got goosebumps
because this is like textbook what happens to so many of my clients. And the lessons become faster and quicker and more obvious, and sometimes not as obvious. And sometimes the relationship will look so perfect apart from this one thing, and it's almost like the universe is going, are you worth it? Will you settle? Do you want this? It's almost everything except for this giant red flag that's in your face, but are you willing to settle for that? Yeah.
Even if we don't call it the universe, I mean, whatever our belief systems are, but even if it's simply that projection from our unconscious that manifests as a person outside of ourselves, because we still need to make the choice that we're worthy, that we deserve better, that we've learned the lesson. And so that choice feels so uncomfortable when we've done the same pattern and over again, because that one feels comfortable. We will psychologically, we will choose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar pleasure because we're used to it. It's okay. We can keep suffering. Like it's comfortable to be in the suffering sometimes. It's crazy to say it that way, but it actually is. And so it's oftentimes easier to choose, okay, let's just do the same thing again. We're not consciously choosing, but unconsciously, then actually be uncomfortable and sit with the discomfort of maybe there is no one else. Maybe no one else is going to show up if I reject this opportunity or this person, or what if I'm not worthy? And then all of this stuff comes up. And that's when we get to work. And that's the beautiful point where I'm like, perfect. It's all coming up. So you feel really uncomfortable. Yeah. Beautiful. This is where the most potent work can be done, when we feel really uncomfortable, because that's when it all comes up to the surface.
It's so, I've just got back into fasting, and I yesterday did like a 38-hour fast, and there were times in it when it was really uncomfortable, and it just feels so parallel to me that like there were moments of like real discomfort, but in that moment, I know my body is like healing itself. I've done a lot of reading on fasting and the benefits to the body, and the body needs that uncomfortableness to be able to heal. And like it's so ridiculously similar, which is cool, right? Like, and you just have to get through it because it doesn't last. I know when I get these uncomfortable moments of feeling hungry, 5 minutes later, I'm not hungry anymore. I haven't done anything different. I maybe had a sip of water or something, but it's gone, And that happens with emotions too. They don't last forever.
Exactly. And that's a really good point. And I feel with the fasting, you're detoxing. Your body is detoxing, shedding, regenerating. And the same happens with the emotions. When we're healing, we're detoxing these emotions that are no longer serving us. And oftentimes we are running even from an emotion, from the memory of an emotion, because when you first experienced it in childhood, it felt too big to handle. It felt like dying in a way, because we're tiny little people that the brain isn't even fully developed. And neuroscience says that for a baby or a child, emotional pain feels or registers the same way in our brain as physical pain. Emotional pain and physical pain are not different. So just imagine you're a tiny little being. You don't even know what's going on. You're like, what is this world? You can't fully understand. You have no self-concept. You're completely reliant on caregivers to keep you safe. And then there are big emotions. You feel unsafe. You're scared for your survival, because that's what happens in those moments, right? You're afraid you won't survive in a way, because disconnection from a caregiver means, oh my God, I might not survive if this person's not available to me. And that's attachment theory, right? Like if this caregiver of mine is not available, I literally might die right now. So for us as kids, as babies, this is a super intense experience. For us as adults, we're like, well, okay, my mother is looking the other way. She'll turn around in a second. It's okay. Or she's on the phone. She'll be available in 2 minutes. We can rationalize it, and we can understand, and we can temper ourselves. And, we have these resources. But as kids, depending on how old we are, we just don't have these resources. And in that moment, it can feel so intense. And so that moment felt so intense. And we're scared of actually feeling the intensity of that again. But if we actually go into it now, we realize quickly, oh, that emotion doesn't even stay. Even if I try to feel this intensity for 10 minutes, you wouldn't be able to feel it for 10 minutes. You just can't. It keeps molding and shifting. When you really tune into the feeling that you're so afraid of, or when you get triggered and you really go into it and you want to make it bigger and wider and everything, it's going to shift so quickly that you can't actually grasp it and keep it.
It's so beautiful for people to know, like, go into the darkness, I think that comes back to exactly what you were saying in the beginning. There's this avoidance of darkness in society, and it is deemed as bad. Like, that is what all the messaging is around it. That's where hell is. That's where bad things happen. All horror movies are in those colors. Like, it's deemed as a negative thing. So no wonder people are afraid of it.
But what's also really dark? The womb. And we all come from there. And it's a beautiful place of gestation and growth. So maybe the darkness is just the place where we're cocooning and growing and shifting and changing. Because the light can do that.
It's so true.
You're going to be the light. When you walk into your darkness, you actually you're the light that comes into that darkness and brings awareness. And so you can start looking around and being curious. Okay, what's actually going on in here? Okay, some cobwebs in the corners. Haven't been here in a while, but
yeah, it's beautiful. I love that. I tell everyone about your book, your shadow book, because I think it's such a marvelous resource, and I just want people to know about it. And, I'll put all your links below in the show notes, but just so I invite everyone to go onto your Instagram, because you've got a lot of great, like, journal prompts and ways of looking at shadow if you're unsure of what shadow work is. So, yeah, tell everyone about that magical resource.
Wonderful. Yeah. You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's called Shadow Work Guide and Workbook. And it's basically a resource that I created for everybody to have a structured way to do shadow work, because it can be overwhelming. It can be difficult, and it brings up a lot of stuff. And so it's a guide. Basically, it's a combination of information to help you understand what you need to understand to start doing the work. So there are journal prompts throughout the whole book to help you dive into all of these aspects. And so when you go chapter by chapter by chapter, in the end, just one of my favorite things that I often do with my clients, once I understand what is the pattern that was created in childhood and how is it still affecting them now, you can actually go and design, like, there's a structure that you can use to actually understand how that childhood pattern, that maladaptive pattern belief strategy, is still affecting you now as an adult. And it brings so much clarity. And so the self-awareness aspect is really the most important aspect of everything that we do, because we can't change anything that we are unaware of. And so, yeah, the book goes into really understanding shadow work, NLP, how we reach our goals, what's in the way of our goals. Because in the end, for me, shadow work is a means to an end as well. It's beautiful healing, but it's also because we want to create a better life for ourselves. We have dreams, we have hopes, we have things that we want to create, whether it be relationships, businesses, whatever it is. And so the manifestation of what we desire only feels out of reach because our current identity doesn't match up with what we want. Because actually do strongly believe that we keep attracting and manifesting who we are. Our beliefs, our values, everything about us keeps attracting to us. So many people try to create from their old persona without questioning who they are, really understanding themselves and actually doing the deep healing work.
Yeah.
But then the trauma gets in the way of taking the action needed to manifest something new.
Yes.
So that inner child is going to say, you know what, I don't feel safe to go there. That does not sound like a good idea.
Yeah.
And then we procrastinate. Then we feel like we're just not good enough, like we're not worthy. People will laugh at us, whatever it is. And we go back into our little place inside ourselves and we try to hide. And it's only because we don't have the inner resources. And with the book, you can really understand, okay, what are these strategies that I've created? And once you bring them to light and you understand, oh, I actually have an abandonment schema or program. So I feel once I get into a relationship, I feel like that person will abandon me. So I've actually decided it's safer not to even try to be in a relationship. Once you have that understanding, you can actually choose, okay, do I want to keep doing this? And through the journal prompts, through the work in the book, you can really dismantle all of that and then actually start manifesting new results in your life.
I want people to rewind. Is that a thing now? Go back? It's not a cassette tape. But go back and hear that because it's so important that you know, it's not so much around anymore, although I do see the rhetoric around of like, think positive thoughts, like do these affirmations, do all this like stuff that's in your head that is like really thought focused, and then you'll manifest what you want. But it's not, you don't manifest from your thoughts, like you manifest from those beliefs, your core beliefs there about yourself. And so like this is what this work is in doing. If you can rewire the stuff that's underneath it's not the surface level stuff. You can say a bazillion affirmations. They're not going to do a thing if you don't believe them internally, and you're wasting your time, to be quite honest. So you're just going to get frustrated and annoyed because it's not working, because you're not doing the real work, you know. You can go, I am beautiful, I am beautiful, I am beautiful. Unless you like really believe that, it's not going to work. So like, and vision boards are beautiful also, but until you do the inner work, like, you know, this is why this stuff is so important if you want to shift anything. Like if you actually want to make change and shift things, you have to do this work, which I know people avoid because they feel like it's difficult, but is it not more difficult repeating the same freaking pattern every day? Like, I just don't understand how that's not more frustrating.
Amen to that. It is more frustrating, but it's the familiar pain.
True. But you got to like choose
So
your pain, right? Choose the pain that you're going to do. You're going to have pain anyway. Yeah.
Choose your heart, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly, beautifully said. That's exactly it. And this whole affirmation thing, like, oh, I'm rich, I'm wealthy, I'm a wealthy woman.
Yeah.
Well, unless you actually can drop into the knowing of that, the understanding of that inner feeling and knowing and trusting of it, you're not going to manifest it. And a lot of people, like you say, they don't understand that it's not just about repeating a phrase, because if you say I'm a wealthy woman and a part of you goes, no, you're not.
Yeah.
It's not working.
Yeah.
But that's good, because if you say that to yourself and you realize there is resistance,
yes,
okay, there is work to be done.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So look at your goals and say it out loud, and then realize what's happening inside of you. Because if there is any part of your body that reacts, that says, ooh, you know, like sometimes we have this closing off, or like a pain or tingling, whatever it may be, or a voice inside you says, no, you're not, then there is work to be done, and beliefs to be shifted, and patterns to be shifted. And that's where the work begins. That's where the manifestation work begins. The manifestation work is actually not some work where you try to project energy outside of yourself and get something to you from the field. It's about going within, rearranging yourself, your beliefs, and it magically appears, because you keep manifesting every second of the day. But if you change your electromagnetic signature and you change who you are, you attract completely new situations, new opportunities, new people, and you then have the resources to take action, because action is actually an integral part of manifestation.
Yes.
But if we feel stuck in trauma responses, we're not taking actions at all. We just want to hide.
I think, like, again, listen to that, everyone, because action is so important. I had this client once who was like, I'm just not, I'm doing all the work. I've done all this belief work. And she'd done so much inner work and we'd shifted so many beliefs. She's like, I'm just not sure why it's not happening. I'm like, because you're not leaving your house. Like, I'm not sure what man you expected to just turn up to the door and be like, I'm here, ready to see you now. You still have to take the action, do the work, get out there, do something. It doesn't have to be the typical action, but it has to be something.
And sometimes it can be really, really small. Sometimes that's how it was for me. I was on Hinge, but on and off, because I felt like, oh my God, this is just too exhausting. And, really, like, I felt like there were not really many high quality people on there. So it felt like work to me and I didn't enjoy it. But one evening I sat on my couch and I heard this voice inside my head that said, unpause your profile. And I thought, okay, why not? I'm going to do that. And then I think two or 3 days later, I matched with the wonderful man that I'm with right now. So I literally only had to press a button and he showed up and sent me a message and all these things. So, sometimes it's not that we need to do a lot. Sometimes it's just we need to listen in that tiny little moment and follow our inner guidance and trust that what we've asked for, that what we're vibing with, what we're calling in is going to come through. Because sometimes people get scared of, oh my God, now I need to take all this action.
Totally. And I hear people say all the time, like, it's a numbers game. I hear that all the time. It's a numbers game. You've got to get through so many people before you
I've heard
meet that
so
person.
Many times too.
Like all these beliefs, things that we end up believing that I don't even know where they get them from. It's thanks to social media. There's so many doom and gloom stories out there about dating that it's hard for anyone to have any belief about it. That is such a beautiful story.
We got to be really mindful.
Such a beautiful story because also you did the inner work, right? Sorry, you did that inner work and and then you have the space to be aware to hear that voice. Like if you hadn't done that work, I don't know that there would be clarity to be able to hear the voice come in to go do that action. Yeah,
and I feel an important part of manifestation is also surrender. And I was actually at a point where I didn't care anymore. Sounds harsh, but I was just okay with never meeting the kind of guy that I envisioned. So I was unapologetic. I was just, my stance was either this or nothing else. And I'm okay with nothing else, but I'm not going to compromise. And that's when it comes in.
I love that. Love that. I hope people get a lot of, that was such a tiny part of your story, I know, but I hope people get hope from that just tiny snippet into how you've met this beautiful human, because it's the fact, like another thing that people say to me so often is, people tell me I'm being too fussy or that I, need to compromise on what I want and, not with things that are really, really, really important to you. No, you don't, because you're going to end up resenting that person. And I always say to people, please trust me, because I work with couples and I see when people have settled. I see them 5-10 years down the track, and just I can warn you now not to do that, Yeah.
That's such an important message, I feel. Don't settle with anything in life. Bronnie Ware, who was a palliative nurse, she wrote a book called the 10 Regrets of the Dying, or 5 Regrets, top 5 Regrets, or something like that. And the top regret was really not living a life true to themselves and making compromises and, not following their dreams. And so I feel once we get to the end of our lives, we're not going to regret having standards and boundaries and following our dreams, even if it never works out, whatever. I think the regret is I never tried. What if I had tried? What if it had worked? That's what's really going to get you, the what if.
Yep.
So I feel it's so important to just follow what's right for you, what you feel called to, and to give it your all and to just dive into whatever resistance comes up around it, whatever belief systems say you can't have it, and raise your standards and be unavailable for anything less. Whatever you want, you got to become unavailable for the other option. Like if you want to make $10,000 in your business, 10,000 always seems to be the one number, right? In your a month in your business. Yeah, at 10,000 a month. That's the thing that circles everywhere. But if you want that, then you got to be unavailable to making less. So are you still available for making less? Or are you actually only available for 10K and nothing else? And you know how I became completely, okay, I'm fine with not having a man, but if I'm going to have a man, I'm going to have this kind of man. So, okay, I'm fine with not having a business, but if I'm going to have a business, it's going to make this and this amount of money. So we got to get really clear and then clean ourselves up internally about what's in the way of that.
So beautiful. That's like a mic drop moment. Anything else that you would add? Or I'm sure like there's a million different tangents I've wanted to go on with you, and you're the beautiful woman who wrote my human design book a bazillion years ago. So like it would be cool to visit that as well. But anyway, we can have you back on. Anything else, you know, that you feel is pressing that you want to share with everyone?
I feel just trusting themselves, trusting that the next step is always going to show up, that the next right person is going to show up to help them, that they are always guided, that there is no pain that's not useful. There is nothing that's torturing you. It's just the sooner you start to heal, the sooner you take action on the pain that you feel and you try to find solutions. There are solutions. You just got to find the right people. Sometimes you search a little bit, or you have a couple of steps until you find that one person, that one resource that really drops it in. But never stop searching and finding that healing, because it's available.
Oh, that's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for being on. Tell everyone how they can find you and, you know, look at your amazing stuff and, you know, just work with you. How can they find you?
Thank you. Yeah, they can find me on Instagram at Sharon_Kirstin. They can find me on my website, SharonKirstin.com. They can find my book on Amazon. It's called Shadow Work. I also have another book on there about soul purpose, which is called The Answers Within. That's where they all are. So
beautiful.
Yeah,
and that will all be in the show
they're
notes
on
too.
Instagram. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're going to find their way.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. I've really loved it.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a beautiful conversation.